Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. You'll find the links in the video description. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been looking at the games from the Tata Steel tournament in Vaikonze, the Tata Steel Masters, but there was another tournament going on there, the Challengers tournament, featuring a lot of young talents, and it was won convincingly by the 18-year-old from India, Arjun Erigaisi. I mean, he absolutely dominated the field, scoring 10.5 out of 13. So I wanted to show you one of his games, and well, he's just one more of the remarkable cohort of Indian players who just have so much promise for the future. Of course, in the Tata Steel Masters, we saw Ramesh Babu Pragnananda. We're looking at Arjun Erigaisi here. There's Nihal Sarin. I mean, there are so many great young Indian players. But anyway, let's concentrate on Arjun Erigaisi. And I wanted to show you this game because I think it shows his well, the kind of masterful strategy he has. He's, you know, quite a multi-talented player, multifaceted player. And also it's played against the Kalashnikov. And so that interested me as well. As many of you know, I have a particular interest in the Kalashnikov. I've brought out a course at the end of last year in the autumn for Chessable. So, you know, I'm always interested to see Kalashnikov games, and 6c4 is a move that, you know, tries to really dominate black. You know, you clamp the center. Personally, I think black has pretty good chances against this, but not well. Let's take a look at the game, and I'll explain further. So Erigaisi's opponent here is Daniel Dada, who is a young talented player from Belgium. Now he plays with bishop e7. The system that I recommend in the course is with bishop e6 and playing with g6 and bishop g7. And I think putting on bishop on g7 is a really dynamic setup that gives black counter chances and, you know, often allows the knight into d4. Bishop e7 is kind of the old way of playing against this Maróczi system. And you could say it's very solid, but I don't think it's dynamic enough. But let's have a look. Well, I mean, here Dada played the kind of traditional move, bishop g5, to exchange off the so-called bad bishop. But I think actually exchanging off those bishops robs black's position of a lot of its dynamism. And one can just play knight f6 here in castles. Okay, it's not quite as fizzy as the fianchetto variation. Nevertheless, even that's, I think, more interesting than this. Bishop g5 is very solid, exchanging off that bad bishop. But I think it gives white very comfortable play. Queen e7 played. I mean, I'm not sure about Queen e7 really. It allows knight d5. Now here's, I mean, black can exchange that off, but I think in this kind of position, this is very comfortable for white. Nice space advantage. You know, it's possible that pawn could be weak later on. There's queen b4. I mean, obviously knight f5 is a potential threat, but this just feels pleasant for white. Nice space advantage. So Dada just dropped back with queen d8. Okay, and now there's a threat to take here. So knight c3. So they've basically repeated moves. And so instead of queen e7, queen b6 is now played. There's a bit of shuffling going on. Here rook a c8 was played. Interesting, another game from if I can't say, from 2015. Carlsen against Ho Yifan went rook d8, and Carlsen won a really nice game with white. He really got such a clamp on the position and eventually managed to swing round and get an attack on the king. And interestingly, that's exactly how Erigaisi plays here. So the clamp is on. Previously we've seen Queen e3 played here, but I think an exchange of queens is exactly what Black would like here. I think that takes a lot of the pressure off because you don't have to worry about an attack on the king. I think it's much better to play as Erigaisi did with h3 and just bishop f1. So just dropping the bishop out of the way, that's nice. The pawn on h3 just stops knight g4. And in this position it's very hard for Black to find counterplay. Knight e7 played. I mean, normally the counterplay comes with b5 to break down these pawns, but obviously at the moment that's not possible. There are 3 pieces controlling b5. Knight e7 played, and then knight e3. So a nice clamp, knight on a beautiful square. Here I think that knight should come back, so that sometimes there might be the option to come into d4. But anyway, that's another story. Queen b8 played. Queen d3, it's an interesting move, covering b5, also looking at f5, and you never know, it might switch over to g3 at some moment. h5, well, I can sort of understand why Black played this. He wants to gain a bit of territory on the king side, but as we're going to see later on, that pawn can become a target. And I think that's a good move, h4, just fixing that pawn there. Bishop e2, that's starting to look at that pawn. King f8. Bishop f3. It's a good square for the bishop, as we're going to see. g6, yeah, in case that knight wants to move. I mean, I think it's, once you play h5, I think it's inevitable you're going to have to play g6. Queen d2, well, that's looking at these dart squares. King g7 covers these squares. I mean, at the moment, I would say Black's king looks pretty secure. Lots of minor pieces around there. You know, how exactly does White try to start an attack? You certainly can't go for g4. So what do? Well, Erigaisi played knight e2. Now he could just continue the clamp with a4, but he goes for knight e2, just swinging that knight round towards the danger zone. Really interesting. Permitting Black to strike out with b5. So strategically, this is exactly what Black wants to do. Now, be a big mistake to take, because then Black could exchange rooks, and that doesn't look right. Once Black recaptures, there's potential pressure here. Doesn't look good. Instead, knight g3, just swing that knight round. Now it does allow Black to exchange and give White an isolated pawn on c4. Strategically, Black has gained something here. But Erigaisi has bargained on the fact that he's generating this attack on the king side. And that's classic strategy. When you control the centre, when you have a space advantage, use that space advantage to switch to the other side of the board. And particularly as Black's queen is so far away from the action, then this feels like something's going to turn up here. You know, already, you know, White can consider moves like knight here, and there's a queen coming in on g5. So king h7 just kind of steps out of the range of those knights. Rook c3. So perhaps looking to play rook d3, just to put more pressure here. Rook c6. Okay, that kind of preempts an attack on d6. But look, the bishop is on the same diagonal as the rook, and that's very dangerous. Knight ef5. That's a very inviting move to play. So if that's taken, then pawn takes pawn, hits the rook, hits the bishop, opens this up. That's winning for white. So black dropped with knight eg8. That covers the h6 square, of course, so no longer queen h6 possible. Queen g5, the queen moving in, and this sets up some nasty threats. Incredibly, the computer thinks at this moment that black still has reasonable defensive chances if rook d7, even though it allows knight takes. You have to have nerves of silicon to play like this. Incredible. Thinks that the computer thinks that black is just about okay. Well, really, in a practical game, I don't think black would stand any chance there. And they just think it's a really difficult position now. Well, here, let me show the basic threat. If black takes this pawn, then white can take here. Obviously, if one of those knights is taken, then queen g7 is mate. And otherwise, you know, there's a pin here as well. So you can see how Erigaisi has spotted that weakness on h5 and swinging that knight round via e2 was a very attractive maneuver. So, queen g5 just played, bishop takes knight, pawn takes, bishop hits the rook, rook goes back. Now, position is starting to open up on the king side. This queen is still a long way from defending. This is the problem. And these pieces look really good. And the rook could swing over as well. Bishop e4 is very strong, so more pressure here. That means as white didn't exchange, then the queen can't cut through to g7. Even that wouldn't be very good, but yeah, this is winning. Knight takes, knight recaptures. Yeah, the attack is too much. You know, the knight hits here, the rook is swinging over. Queen e7. Now, really simple move. Rook g3. Threatening to take on g6. Queen takes, knight takes. King steps across, and now simply pawn takes pawn. Well, this just wins a stack of material. If king takes, then knight check, discover check. If pawn takes, another knight fork. It's hopelessly lost. Again, threat to take, played knight e6 check. Knight e4. So that targets this one. King f8. Now, very nice winning move. Rook g8. And knight f6 check. Forking king and rook. So white ends up a piece up. Crushing victory. A very classical strategy, actually. Where white is using this space advantage to switch sides, switch the attack. And, you know, very good control over the tactics as well. So Arjun Erigaisi, he is a class act. Magnus Carlsen, you know, said he was very impressed by his play, and he has had some very good results at the end of 2021 as well. So he's yet another name from India to watch out for. Thanks for watching.